This week in EDUC 140, we're taking a look at the role of emotion and affect in our learning. In what ways do we live? People live in three main ways: cognitively, emotively, and behaviorally. We think, we feel, and we act. This is true of most everyday emotions: annoyance, happiness, jealousy, joy, minor depression. But why in this order? To change a behavior pattern, you usually have to think differently about it, have feelings about it, and then act on it. There are exceptions to this think-feel rule. All other things being equal, if I am in pain, I will not be happy. If I am enjoying a good meal, I will experience pleasure. If I'm taking tranquilizers, I will feel calm. But most of our feelings cannot be accounted for in terms of our physical environment. The surprising thing is that very often our feelings seem to contradict what we would expect just by observing our actions and environment. We can be sad when eating a delicious meal, or happy while trudging through the rain on a cold day. Naturally, there are circumstances or events to which our reactions almost bypass cognition. We have to respond without having the time to think about them. Imagine if someone ran into the room and brandished a gun. Your frontal lobes would shut off. You would fall back into your basic brain, or lower brain, or reptilian brain. You will fight, flight, or freeze. This is mostly a universal response. The same is true for traumatic events, such as the death of a loved one. But with our everyday emotions, we humans tend to be very much in command. Today we are going to take a close look at how we live cognitively and how our thoughts prompt our feelings and behavior, or our emotional and behavioral reactions. Because we're going to look at regulating our negative emotions or behavioral reactions, we're specifically going to look at cognitive distortions and thinking errors. These distortions are part of our implicit memory system. As humans, we have an estimated 65,000 thoughts per day. Currently, scientists estimate that about 95% of these thoughts are automated or implicit. That leaves a mere 5% of our thoughts to our conscious mind or working memory. Think about when you were first learning your way around campus. You probably had to use a map, pay attention to the names of all of the buildings, consciously think about what direction you were heading in. But after going to class or other events for a month or so, you probably had a very good idea of how to easily navigate from place to place. And now, walking to classes or to leave your library or to your dorm has become automated or implicit. This frees up your working memory for things like holding a conversation, listening to music, or noticing friends that are walking by. Although we are still thinking about which direction to travel and where to turn left or right, we are doing so at a subconscious level or in our implicit memory system. The thoughts we do here are in our explicit memory system, or our consciousness or working memory. When thinking about the 8 cognitive distortions we're about to discuss, it's important to remember that they are largely automated thoughts. We do not hear them on a conscious level, and thus do not realize they're occurring. When we want to change our emotional or behavioral reactions, these are the most important thinking patterns that need to be changed. We can be in real trouble when any of these occur in our thinking. These occur for all of us and can be extremely detrimental. We've all heard that saying, we can be our worst enemies, and this is how our minds become our enemy. The first cognitive distortion or thinking error is called all or nothing thinking or polarized thinking. This is when a person thinks in very black or white terms. There are no shades of gray. You are either in or out. You either get first place or a complete failure. You are my friend or you are my enemy. Next, we have overgeneralization. This is when we take one bad example and generalize from it, or believe that all other similar experiences will be bad as well. For example, the first psychology professor a student had may have been less than engaging, and they conclude that all psychology professors are boring, or even better, that psychology itself is boring. When you think of overgeneralization, think of stereotypes. As humans, we do tend to put things into larger categories because of all of the information that's coming in through our short-term sensory store. But we run into problem when these overgeneralizations become stereotypes that we act on. Filtering. Someone who is engaging in filtering is filtering in only negative examples. All that we see or recall is the negative feedback. An example of this is something Madonna once said. She said that after a concert, if 99 people come up to her and tell her how great the concert is, and one person says that it was awful, she would focus on that one person that gave her the negative feedback. Mind reading. When we are engaging in mind reading, we are assuming someone else's intentions and impulsively interpreting someone's reaction towards us in a negative way. We are jumping to conclusions. We often imagine that people feel the same way that we do and react to things in the same way. Psychologists call this projection. The problem here is that we tend to buy our initial interpretation and do not bother to check it, and we can be completely wrong. Oftentimes, when we're mind reading, our assumptions can get us into trouble in social situations. Catastrophizing. This is when we're expecting or even visualizing disaster. A small leak in a sailboat can mean that we're surely going to sink, or a headache after looking at WebMD means that we may have cancer. Catastrophizing thoughts often start with, what if? What if I get sick and won't be able to finish the rest of the semester? Magnifying. When we magnify the importance of a negative event, such as one less desirable grade on an exam, tends to seem a lot more significant than it really is. With magnifying, we can either augment the significance of a negative event or minimize the significance of positive events. Magnifying probably sounds very similar to filtering. Think of filtering as a spotlight on negative events, where magnifying is more like a magnifying glass or a telescope. Personalization. This is when we feel like everything is done in a reaction to us. Your friend or professor walk past you and don't smile, and you think that maybe they're upset with you, and not that they're just having a bad day. When people are engaging in personalization, they feel that they are the center of the world. This is okay for children and even in early teenage years, but not very adaptive for adults. Those who tend to engage in personalization tend to constantly measure themselves against others. Even if the comparison is favorable, the underlying assumption is that your underlying value is questionable or unstable and can change at any moment depending upon who you're comparing yourself to. Shoulds. This is when we make demands upon ourselves or others. For example, I should only get straight A's. When we engage in shoulds, we operate from an inflexible set of rules about ourselves and how others should behave. These rules are seen as correct and indisputable. Any deviation from these particular values or standards is bad. As a result, you tend to walk around judging yourself and others. People often irritate you. They don't act or think, quote, correctly. They should know the rules and should follow them. Examples of this would be, I should be the epitome of generosity, consideration, courage, and dignity. Or, I should be totally self-reliant and never need help. People with perfectionistic tendencies tend to engage in shoulds. Remember, these thinking patterns are largely automated, and it can be very difficult to hear them or realize that we're having them. Next, we're going to take a look at what happens when these cognitive distortions lead to negative self-talk. It's amazing how much we talk to ourselves. It's almost hard just to be quiet. Think about if you've ever tried to meditate, or sometimes when you lie down to go to sleep, and the brain just won't shut off. You are trying to find your inner peace, or at least your peace for the night, but your mind is just blabbing away. Psychologists call this self-talk. One of the results of irrational thinking that is of great concern in college is anxiety. And students that are prone to anxiety tend to experience the following types of negative self-talk. The worrier. The worrier tends to engage in negative self-talk that starts with, what if? What if the worst possible situation happens? Such as, You fail a test, and your immediate thoughts go to, what if I fail this course, go on academic probation, get expelled from college, and never land my dream career? The critic. The critic is often judgmental and evaluative in a negative way of our own behavior. The critic tends to magnify or filter our flaws and limitations and use phrases like, that was stupid. The victim. This type of self-talk usually results in feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. The victim feels like they can't, like they have no control over what is occurring in their life. And the perfectionist. The perfectionist tells you that your efforts are no good, that you just aren't good enough, that anything less than perfection is worthless. Thinking back about the 8 cognitive distortions that we went over in the previous 2 slides, you may be able to see how there are some direct connections between those 8 cognitive distortions and these 4 types of negative self-talk. For example, one connection you may have made is how constantly comparing yourself to others can lead to negative self-talk that is judgmental and then demanding of what you should do. So for someone who is engaging in personalization or shoulds, they may have negative self-talk that sounds like the critic or the perfectionist. The perfectionist also tends to engage in all or nothing or polarized thinking, where the worrier tends to be a catastrophizer, and the victim may engage in filtering or magnifying. When you find yourself engaged in these types of negative self-talk, one good activity that you can do is to write down what your mind is telling you. If we are going to be able to change our emotional and behavioral consequences, we need to become aware of what we're telling ourselves. You'll probably notice that your negative self-talk is unnecessarily harsh. We can be much meaner to ourselves than we would ever be to anyone else. And we often say things to ourselves that we would never let anyone else say to us. Would you ever let anyone else call you a failure? Or tell you that you would never amount to anything? It's important to recognize the negative self-talk that's occurring in our heads so that we can not only address it, but we can prevent it from lowering our motivation. For the past 3 slides, we've been examining our irrational thoughts or beliefs that can lead to negative self-talk. Next, we will look at what happens when these thoughts lead to emotional and behavioral consequences. We're now going to examine what actually causes our emotions or behavioral reactions. Take a second to think of an event that recently occurred that put you in a downward spiral. What would common wisdom say caused your emotion or behavioral reaction? The activating event, of course. We often hear people say that someone else is making them mad, or that the circumstance or another person is causing them to have their emotional or behavioral reaction. What are these activating events that we're speaking of? An activating event can be in the past, present, or future. They can also be real or imagined events. Activating events can be a single isolated event, like spilling a drink on your computer, or a continuing unpleasant event, like having to do a group project with someone you may not have clicked with or get along with very well. They can also be good events that did not occur or a bad event that did occur. So common wisdom would say that the activating event caused the emotion. For example, I'm driving on the freeway and someone cuts me off. That person irritated and angered me, correct? Not true. This is crooked thinking. Why crooked? What is the problem with this belief? If we look at it from a cause and effect perspective, what is the problem here? The problem is that the cause of all of your emotions and behavior are activating events that largely are outside of your control, which makes you the effect in the situation. If you see yourself as the cause, you are in control. But if you see the events as the cause, then you are not in control, and this results in an external locus of control. Think back a couple weeks when we were talking about attribution theory, and we were talking about whether things feel internal or external, controllable or uncontrollable. So if the activating event is the cause of our emotions and behavior, this means that you completely take yourself out of the equation. You have no internal locus of control. Without an internal locus of control, everything would feel external and uncontrollable, which would result in you feeling angry, helpless, and victimized. To help prove our point that it is not the activating event that actually causes our emotional and behavioral consequences, I thought it would be a good idea to invite a friend to this lecture. Let's meet him now. So he wasn't so little. The video, of course, was found on YouTube, and the gentleman in the video said that he found this spider in his shower. In Australia, these spiders are actually very common. Ask yourself this. If the activating event was that you found the spider in your shower, what would your reaction be? Would you, 1. Scream, run, and hide; 2. Find something to neutralize it or kill it with; 3. Take a closer look at it out of pseudo-scientific curiosity; or 4. Determine if it would be a good pet? When this question is posed to a live lecture after the same video, there is never one unanimous answer. And there are always a very small handful of students that choose to make the spider a pet. This begs the question, why are there such different reactions? The obvious answer is that we must interpret the same event in different ways, and that if the activating events were truly the cause of our emotions and our behavior, then this would not occur. We have 4 reactions listed here, but this is absolutely not an entire list of the different ways people would react to the same exact event. Now, if we take the spider and replaced it with the event that's causing you stress or anxiety, such as a poor grade, a bad relationship, an argument with a friend, what does this say about your emotional and behavioral reactions? Who's in control? What is the cause of these overwhelming emotions that you may be feeling? It is our thoughts and beliefs, irrational or not, that cause our emotional and behavioral consequences. We can relate this back to everything in life. So what is actually occurring when we have these emotional or behavioral reactions? Let's take a look. Oftentimes, you hear activating events referred to as triggers, but our emotional and behavioral consequences are caused by step B. That is to say, our beliefs, irrational beliefs, self-talk, and automatic thoughts cause our emotions and behavioral reactions. Understanding that it is our thoughts that cause our emotions is called straight thinking. With straight thinking, you are no longer the helpless victim of activating events or triggers. Since it is your thoughts and beliefs that are the cause, it puts you back in control of your emotional and behavioral consequence. You are no longer just the effect. Think back to the event that recently drove you crazy and identify what that thought was. What was the B that possibly made you come unglued? What was the worrier saying, or the critic, or the victim? What was the perfectionist telling you you should do? We need to take a look at where these thoughts are coming from. What is the irrational belief? These thoughts may not be obvious to you, especially because they may be automated or implicit. It is up to us to seek out what our cognitive distortions are so we can begin to change them. One way to do this is by using RET, or Rational Emotive Therapy. There are 5 steps in Rational Emotive Therapy. A helpful mnemonic to help you remember them are A, B, C, D, E. We'll go through each individually now. We know the A, the activating event. This is the trigger or external event that occurs in our environment, such as a giant spider taking over our bathroom. B. B, again, is our beliefs and self-talk. These are our cognitive distortions or thinking errors and negative self-talk, such as spiders are scary. A catastrophizer might picture numerous spiders taking over the house, as in the 90s movie Arachnophobia. C is the consequence. These are our emotional and behavioral reactions to the self-talk and beliefs that occur after the activating event, such as we may kill the spider, or run screaming from the house, or consider never showering again. D is the disputing of the irrational beliefs that we had. This is when we directly address the irrational beliefs or cognitive distortions that caused our emotional or behavioral reactions, such as you might think to yourself that spiders are common and that they help control the bug population. There's always the oldie but goodie. It's probably more afraid of you than you are of it. And lastly, E, the effects of the dispute, the new emotions or behavior. When we dispute our irrational beliefs and we begin to think rationally, we start to figure out how to deal with the event or the spider. We can prevent the spider from entering our house again after removing it, or we can begin to plan how to overcome other obstacles that occur in our life. Now, the problem that can make it especially difficult for us to discover the B is that we actually do not experience it before our emotional or behavioral consequences. Even though the activating event triggers our beliefs or self-talk, which then lead to our emotional and behavioral consequences, the way that we actually experience this is A, C, B, D, E. Our thoughts are so quick, our neurons fire so rapidly that our emotional and behavioral reactions to us seem to occur immediately following the activating event. In order for us to be straight thinkers, to put ourselves back in control of our emotional and behavioral reactions, we have to consciously and purposely seek out the B, those beliefs, cognitive distortions, and automated thoughts that are causing our emotions and behavior. We have to listen to our negative self-talk and dig deeper to find those underlying beliefs that feed into the negative things that we tell ourselves. It is only through the process of finding and disputing these irrational thoughts that we can regulate our emotions and affect. Without the regulation of our emotions, it can be an uphill battle to regulate our motivation, which has an emotional root. This means that if we cannot find the B and dispute it, it can be extremely difficult to actively choose challenging tasks, persist through obstacles, or have a deep level of mental involvement. So if you are overwhelmed by your emotions, or do not feel in control of your behavior, if you are exploding on others or imploding on yourself, think about what occurred right before your emotional reaction. What was the trigger? What cognitive distortions or irrational beliefs or negative self-talk were set off following this trigger? How can you dispute these thoughts? It is important to understand that when we feel victimized and trapped by our emotions and emotional behavior, that the only way out is to think our way out. Before we wrap this lecture up, let's take a look at RET in action to see how it may play out in an academic setting. When we think about ourselves as students, oftentimes we encounter negative self-talk, cognitive distortions, and irrational beliefs when we encounter failure. Failure to you may be very different from failure to someone else, and there is no correct definition. So if you believe that you've encountered failure, then you in fact have. Failure for you may be a B+. So let's say that the activating event is that you received a B+ on your exam. Now, even though this would trigger cognitive distortion or irrational beliefs, what you're going to experience next is your emotional consequence, which is not going to be your belief, but is going to be your anger, or whatever emotion you would feel when you encounter failure. So upon receiving your grade from Blackboard, you become extremely angry. This may result in tense muscles, feeling warm, rapid breathing or heart rate, etc. Behaviorally, you may snap at your roommate or significant other if they ask what's wrong. You may also decide that you're not going to any classes that day because you're so upset. Chances are, the next thing that will occur is negative self-talk. This is the part where you really want to pay attention. What are you saying? Let's explore these beliefs. Maybe you're saying, I'm a disappointment. I'm a failure. This class is stupid. The test was unfair. A B plus is not good enough. I'm not good enough. I will never be good enough. I'm always going to fail. There's no use in trying. Think about how these beliefs and negative self-talk would affect your emotion and learning. How would you feel about studying, going to class, going to a study group, or reading your textbook? Without actively choosing to engage in these tasks, how would your learning be affected? In order to positively affect our motivation and learning, we would need to dispute these beliefs. General statements, such as a mantra that you like, or something that a trusted other, like a parent or a coach or a former teacher, has told you in the past and has positively affected you, may be a good place to start. These sayings may help you put things into perspective or reframe your thoughts. But it is helpful to be more specific and address your irrational beliefs. This will allow you to regulate your emotion and then to focus on the improvement and effort that is needed in an academic setting. If you find that you're telling yourself that a B plus is not good enough, that you do not feel good enough or worthy, that your effort isn't good enough, you may want to focus on how you've improved in the past, whether it was in the current course or in previous courses where you may have felt the same way. Oftentimes, disputing irrational beliefs can be very difficult for us. It's helpful to think about what you would tell a friend who's in the same situation that you are. If they were coming to you and telling you that they failed this exam, they received a B plus, they were hoping for an A, they needed the A, that there's no future for them, that their efforts aren't good enough, that they're not good enough, what would you tell them? Think about someone that you love and someone that you care about and how you want them to move past the moment and to see the bigger picture. How would you help them see the bigger picture? A lot of times when we think about someone that we care about, it's easier for us to come up with these disputing beliefs. After coming up with these disputing beliefs, we can apply them to ourselves and our situation. The new effect of these disputing thoughts will likely be that you are able to turn down the heated emotions and behavior and to feel more in control of the situation. This will likely help you feel calmer and better able to engage in the rest of your planned activities for the day without becoming angry or upset with others or yourself. After you've processed the situation enough, then you're going to want to come back and reflect on it to see what steps you need to take to put effort into improvement so that not only your thoughts are disputing your irrational beliefs, but your actions are as well. Finally, as you are learning this week, reflect on these questions. What are some common activating events that trigger emotional reactions for you? What one or two cognitive distortions do you mainly engage in? What automated irrational beliefs or negative self-talk do you hold about your own failures? Are you engaging in crooked thinking? How can you put yourself back in control? How can you dispute the irrational thoughts that cause undesired emotional or behavioral reactions? Don't forget to take Quiz 7 via Blackboard.